Hey, y'all good lookins. How y'all doing? So, welcome to Tangled in Tennessee. I'm your host, Vanessa Mcgee, and I am here for you on Tuesdays. Here, we deep dive into mysterious, haunting, and sometimes downright chilling tales of Tennessee's past. So, if you like country music, mystery, history, Appalachian folklore, all that good Tennessee stuff, you might want to consider liking and subscribing if you want to. You can also listen to us on Spotify. Not us, just me. Listen to me on Spotify. And also, I put up some little clips on TikTok about random Tennessee facts at Vanessa Mcgee. So you might want to check everything out because you just should. Tennessee's awesome. So, you guys, every single year, luckily this season just passed, I go to Kroger and I am like, okay, I'm going to buy vegetables and I'm going to start getting back on my fitness journey. Okay. So that's the plan. And every time around this season, I go in, and I'm not talking like winter, fall, spring. I go into Kroger and they are standing out there and they are cute little, they got on these little uniforms usually, and they are trying to sell the most delicious things ever. Do you know what I'm talking about? I got a problem with these girls because they always mess up my diet. Girl Scouts. Oh my gosh. I swear to you, I feel like they put on the Puss in Boots eyes. Do you know what I'm talking about from Shrek? Like them big eyes. And you can't say no because they're so dang cute. And then I come home with like 5 boxes of Thin Mints and vegetables that I bought don't get eaten and they should be. But anyway, I'm like, why are these little girls always standing out here? But after I found out about this horrible story, I'm so glad that they are there. And just control yourself, Vanessa. The little girls can stand out there and sell their delicious cookies. So this story is awful, and if you are sensitive to anything with children, you might not want to listen to this. We have other tales. Check out the Moon-Eyed People. Nothing too bad there. But this story is about a young girl who vanished in 1975 selling Girl Scout cookies. So if this is something you may want to hear about, stay tuned. On February 25th, 1975, Marcia Trimble went out selling Girl Scout cookies for her very first year in the Girl Scouts, and she was very excited about this. She went over to her neighbors and vanished. They had no idea where she went. So, Easter of 1975, a family neighbor was going out into their shed when they discovered her body. It took 33 years for them to discover who actually committed this horrible crime. And this is the story of Marcia Trimble. Girl Scouts started selling cookies in 1917. In between the 1930s and 1940s, the girls would bake cookies at home and then go around to family, friends, and neighbors selling their cookies. Marcia lived in a small subdivision called Green Hill right outside of Nashville. It was considered a very safe neighborhood. The kids were able to roam free because the parents felt that it was safe. They were able to go to neighbor's house, play with their friends outside. Marcia was a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl that enjoyed riding her bike, going roller skating. She liked Barbie dolls, playing with her friends, things that a typical 9-year-old girl did in those days. It is said that Marcia was very intelligent and she was just a very smart, sweet little girl. Marcia joined the Girl Scouts in 1975. It was her very first year, and her mother was the troop leader. Marcia joined the Girl Scouts right around the time her parents were separating. They weren't officially divorced, but they were separating. And it is reported that her father had a problem with alcohol, but it was not a situation where he was like domestic violence. Nothing like that was going on. On February 25th, 1975, Marcia came home from school. She did her homework. She went and made herself a snack and watched Gilligan's Island. And then afterwards, she went and collected her cookies and got a little wagon, put her cookies in the wagon, and told her mother that she was going around the neighborhood to sell/deliver some of the cookies. While she was going up and down the road, she ran into a friend. I got my notes. She ran into a friend, Mark Egerton. And Mark Egerton was a little boy that was their neighbor. He also was in her class, and she knew him really well. He was going with her around the neighborhood, helping her sell cookies. As they were walking, Marcia noticed that her grandmother pulled up in her driveway And when they say she was smart, she was. Because she went and took her little cookies, went up to her grandma, and was like, Grandma, you want to buy some cookies? Because you know grandmas are going to buy all of them. If it is their grandchildren, they're going to buy them all. And that is exactly what happened. So Marcia sold all her cookies that she had in her wagon to her grandma and then went back up into her bedroom to collect more cookies to go sell. But Mark decided that he didn't want to continue walking with Marcia to sell the cookies because he had started playing basketball with Marcia's older brother Chuck, who was 12. Marcia told her mother that she was going to go across the street right next door to Mrs. Maxwell's house to sell some cookies. She didn't bring a jacket or anything like that, but it was really cold, but she was just going to go across the street, sell some cookies to Mrs. Maxwell, and come right home. So Mrs. Maxwell, let me tell you. Well, let me tell you the story first, and then I'll get into that. Mrs. Maxwell was coming home from a birthday party. And so y'all, Mrs. Maxwell was a neighbor that lived very close to them, and she was coming back from a birthday party. And Marcia was specifically told her mother that is where she was going. And if you remember, she didn't have a jacket or anything on, and it's cold outside. So Mrs. Maxwell was coming home, pulling up in her driveway, when she noticed that Marcia was coming over, and she got a glimpse of what looked like, they said, a small figure like a child about Marcia's age, and a man that was wearing a trench coat, raincoat type of deal, like a long jacket. Okay, and it wasn't somebody that Mrs. Maxwell recognized. And it was in the neighbor next to Mrs. Maxwell's house. So, y'all, I would have been like, who is that? Who are they talking to? You know, I'm just too damn nosy. And I would have wanted to know who Marcia was talking to, especially if it's somebody that you don't know. But I guess because this neighborhood was supposed to be safe and all of that, that maybe Mrs. Maxwell didn't think that was a weird thing, but no ma'am. Anyway, so Mrs. Maxwell decided she knew Marcia was going to come over, like she just assumed Marcia was coming over to sell her Girl Scout cookies. She went into the house and went and grabbed her checkbook and was waiting for Marcia to come over. But what actually made Mrs. Maxwell come out of the house is that she heard her dog, Mrs. Maxwell's dog, barking ferociously. Now, the dog's name was Daisy, and it was in the backyard. And where Daisy was barking, it was like almost in the corner of their yard. And she was pointing to a pathway that went to another neighbor's yard that was a little far away, like almost in the woods. This dog is barking crazy at this corner. And Mrs. Maxwell thought that was kind of weird because Daisy was never a ferocious dog and she never barked at the children. Right there, Mrs. Maxwell, whatever. But Mrs. Maxwell didn't. She just like, oh, Daisy's doing something, and went back in the house. So night comes and dinner time comes up, and Marcia is nowhere to be found. Her family, her mother, they get really nervous and asking around, oh, where is she? Where is Marcia? And they called Mrs. Maxwell and asked her if Marcia was over there. Maybe she was visiting. And Mrs. Maxwell said that she never came over. So that put up a bunch of red flags. But what really made the mother call the police is that their two pet family dogs followed Marcia everywhere throughout the neighborhood, and they came home without Marcia. And that right there is because she listened to her dogs. She knew something was wrong. So they called the authorities. Immediately, the authorities came over. The entire neighborhood started searching for Marcia, and the authorities started questioning people, and one name kept coming up. It was a 15-year-old named Jeffrey Womack. So Jeffrey was actually at his job when they first went to his house, because all the children kept saying Jeffrey Womack. So they went to his house. He was at work, and he worked actually at a daycare with a divorced 30-year-old woman named Peggy. Now, Peggy was supposed to be out for the evening, and Jeffrey was supposed to be there watching the children in the daycare. Now, who's going to leave a bunch of daycare children with a 15-year-old? I mean, come on, they were wild in the 70s, let me tell you. But anyway, so he was supposed to be at work, and then when he found out that the authorities were looking for him, he actually went to Marcia's family's house, told them that he had seen her, and he told her to go away because he didn't have any money for cookies, and he sent her on her way. And he said that was the last time that he had seen her. Now, the authorities thought this was kind of weird because they said he was actually the last person to see her alive, but they also said Mrs. Maxwell was too. So which one was it? So the authorities really started to focus on Jeffrey. They asked him to come to the station to do an interview, which he did, and they noticed that he had FU written all over his shoes, which they thought this was, kind of like what you got that on your shoes for, because he was also known to be, he kind of had a rough upbringing, rough personality, and they were aware of this. So, and he watching children. No, that just clicked in my head. Anyway, so the police asked him to empty his pockets during this interview, and when he does, he pulls out $5, some change in change rolls, and a pack of condoms. So the police, were like, well, you said you didn't have no money. How come you said you didn't have no money to give to Marcia for cookies, but maybe he just didn't want to buy any. Anyway, but then they questioned him about the pack of condoms, and he told them that he had bought them for Saturday for a concert that was coming up. Now, Marcia she disappeared on a Tuesday, so obviously they found that very suspicious. But really, it came to light, the real reason why he had those condoms is because he and Peggy, the daycare owner, were having a little thing going on. Now, mind you, she's in her 30s and he's 15. So that was a whole nother story that they found out. But back to Marcia, the police asked him if he would take a polygraph test, and he took not one but two and passed both of them. So the police had no evidence, nothing that could hold him, and they released him. What followed in the next few days was a massive, extensive manhunt. It was one of the biggest ones that was in Nashville's history. Police, neighbors, news crews, everyone was looking for Marcia. It took 33 days, and her face was plastered everywhere. Every telephone pole, every news update, her name became prayers of every mother in Nashville wanting her to come home. Then on March 30th, Easter Sunday of all days, her body was found, and it was hidden just 150 feet from her home in a neighbor's garage. Now, on Easter Sunday, actually the Good Friday before Easter Sunday, Marcia actually would have been 10 years old. That was her birthday. And the family that lived down the path that Mrs. Maxwell originally thought Marcia went to in the woods, they were having an Easter family gathering, as you do on Easter. And John, the owner of the home, told his brother-in-law, Harry, that he had a boat motor for sale if Harry wanted to buy it. Now, Harry said sure, and he went out there, he looked in the shed, was moving junk around. He bumped into what he originally thought was a doll, and then he realized it was a body of a little girl. So, calmly, Harry walks to the family gathering and calls for John. I don't know how he was walking calmly, but it is reported that he was calm. And he walked up to the family, got John, the owner of the home, and he didn't want to alert anybody. And he told John, I think I found a dead body in your shed. Like, wow, what a Easter gathering for that to even be. What do you even say to that? So John obviously got up. The two of them went to the shed and they went looking around, and they found Marcia laying on bags of fertilizer with a kiddie pool put on top of her. Her hair was tangled. She had bruising around her neck, her hands, and they still kept thinking this was a doll, like one of them just praying it's just a doll. And John took a wooden handled broom and poked at her and realized it definitely was not a doll. And they also noticed that she was wrapped up in a comforter, in sheets, and a shower curtain. So immediately they called the authorities. When authorities arrived, they noted also that she was laying on bags of fertilizer. Her legs were covered by the sheets, bedspread, and shower curtain, and that her clothes were completely intact. Her boots were zipped up, and y'all guys, this is horrible. She had cartons of scattered cookie all over her from her Girl Scout cookies. How horrible. Not only that, her little envelope that she kept the money in, and she was keeping a mark of how much was in it, was $15, and it was gone. Now, the autopsy revealed that she had only been actually dead for 10 to 15 days, but she had been missing 33. It was speculated that she was SA,
multiple times, and it is also noted that she had ate something. There was a small green pear in her stomach that she had ate maybe 2 to 3 hours before her death. The cause of her death was strangulation. Now, the family who found her in their shed, they knew for certain that she had not been there that long, because the wife of John went out there before Easter, and actually got fertilizer and planting pots to do some flowers to make her yard look good before the gathering for Easter. Not only that, the cadaver dogs also were out there. A bunch of dogs were sniffing around all throughout the neighborhood. They actually went to the shed, did not find anything. So somebody, they assumed, went and put her into the shed where she was taken. So Jeffrey was still a suspect years later. So her story, it was just crazy, because in a blink of an eye, this little girl was taken away, and it haunted the city for decades. And it was a mystery that twisted through the years of a false accusation of one man, and that one man who lived under suspicion for 30 years was Jeffrey Womack. So when he was 19 in 1979, he took 3 more polygraph tests and passed all of them. So in total, Jeffrey took 5 polygraph tests, and all of them came back that he was telling the truth. It was also noted, and the officers were very convinced that it was him, and their reasoning was because of how she was SA. They said that it was done with somebody with a small manly area, a small penis. That is what they concluded for her, thinking that it was Jeffrey. And I'm like, there's got to be more, that's what you're going by? But that was what they really thought. They really thought it was a teenager that committed this act. So Jeffrey appeared before the judge many times, and he was always set free because they had no evidence linking him to Marcia's death other than hearsay. It got so bad about the hearsay that even Marcia's family started to believe that, he may not be the guy. There's probably somebody else out there, because he kept passing polygraph tests. So there was always a lack of evidence every time that Jeffrey was brought to court, and they just couldn't link them together. And the only evidence they had was about the small junk, and because they say that he was the last person to see her alive. So let's fast forward to 1990. Marcia actually had human remnants on her. It was on her clothes, on the bedding that was wrapped around her. They found DNA. But in 1975, there was no way to really test it. So in 1990, there were a lot of advances, and they actually reopened her case to figure out if they could possibly find a match. So they ran the DNA that was found on Marcia through the database. Nothing popped up as a match. So again, her case went cold. But on February 13th, a young woman named Sarah D. Perez disappeared without a trace, setting off a chain of events that would ultimately intertwine with the story of the younger life lost just 25 days later, Marcia Trimble. So Sarah was 19 years old, and she was described as being bright, optimistic. She was a college student living not far from where she went to school. She was attending Nashville's own Tennessee State University. She worked hard to make her mark in the world. Her father was also a professor at the college. But like so many her age, Sarah also had a lot of life left to live, to experience, and these are things that she never got a chance to enjoy. Her dreams of her education, love, and happiness, all of them were cut short as well. So on the evening of February 13th, 1975, Sarah went out on a date. It was supposed to be a simple, fun evening, night out, enjoying the company of her date and getting to know somebody. She left home dressed up, and she was excited because she was going on this date. So Sarah was going out on her date, and she asked her friend Lynn if she would watch her dog Tex, who was a puppy, overnight, and she would come and get him in the morning. So what happened to Sarah? Well, Sarah went out on the date, and she came home. Her and her date had went to a frat party, and she was 19, and she got drank a little bit too much, no judgment or anything. And she lived on the 3rd floor apartment. And her date offered to walk her up, and she's like, no, I got it. And so, which he should have got out of the car regardless, but he didn't. But Sarah was walking up to her apartment. From her walking from her date's car to the apartment, she was raped and murdered. She was assaulted and murdered, and all of this happened in her apartment. So Lynn, the friend that is watching Tex, comes over the next morning. She sees Sarah laying in the bed. She sees the blankets are all disheveled, but she just assumes that Sarah's sleeping. And so she takes Tex, gets some dog food, takes him back to her home, and the day started getting later. And by nighttime, Sarah worked nights, and Lynn knew this. She knew Sarah's schedule. Went over to take Tex back and give to wake her up to tell her, hey, you got to go to work. So Tex and Lynn go into the apartment, and Tex runs up to Sarah and whines. And so Lynn just like, wow, she must be really tired. So she again takes Tex back to her house. And by that evening, if you remember, her father worked for the university, and the job, like her job, knew who Sarah's father was. They called her and say, hey, what's going on with Sarah? She didn't show up. And so that put him on alert. He went to her apartment and discovered her dead in her bed with her bottoms off. She had bruising around her neck and around her arms. The connection was so staggering. Same city were now both victims of the same predator. However, it was not discovered until 2007. They only lived 5 miles apart from each other. So let's focus back on Sarah. Who could do such a thing to these two young women's lives in such a similar manner? The link between the two cases was still deeply unsettling. At the same time, the DNA that was found at the crime scene of Marcia Trimble was also a match to the predator who had taken Sarah's life. So Jerome Sidney Barrett was 26 years old in 1975. He was arrested in March 1975 for an attempted assault on a woman that was getting undressed. However, this young woman, she carried, and she told him that if he broke into her house, she was going to bang him, but not in that way, like a pow thing. And so he ran off, and she called the authorities, and he was caught. So let's do a little back timeline on Jerome Sidney Barrett. So February 17th, 1975, Belmont University student was raped in Nashville. He also tried to break into another woman's home around the same time, and she could give the description of what he looked like. The only reason why he didn't break in is because this particular woman had a concealed weapon. So February 25th, 1975, this is when Marcia disappeared, and at some point he had assaulted her and all the horrible things that happened to her. So prior to both of these, though, he had assaulted and murdered Sarah. So Barnett was arrested for, shortly after Marcia's disappearance, but he was not linked to any other crimes but this one instance and the potential break-in. It wasn't until decades later that the advancements of DNA technology provided the crucial evidence that they needed. So in 2007 and 2008, DNA evidence from Sarah's crime scene was tested, and it linked to Barnett. But not only that, it also linked to Marcia, which unintentionally solved the other cold case mystery because they weren't even really testing for Marcia. For just the rape alone in March of 1975, he was found guilty. He was put into, he went to prison, and he actually was released in 2007. So they had no way to get his DNA, and it finally came down to them asking him in 2008 if they could get a DNA sample from him, and believe it or not, he said yeah, sure. So I don't think he fully thought that they would be able to track down some of his past crimes that he had committed. And so this cold case got solved unintentionally 33 years later. Bartlett was found guilty at the age of 62 for essay and murder, and he is sentenced now to 44 years in prison. So he's going to die in prison, and he deserves it, because how could you do that to not only Sarah, but a little 9-year-old girl? Seriously? And I personally, I am glad that it is noted that they thought it was a teenager, this poor teenager, Jeffrey Warmack, that was, under suspicion all these years. I am glad that now they know it is Mr. Bartlett with his teeny tiny thing. So in 2014, Virginia, Marcia's mom, wanted to see the photos of her crime scene. She had not seen them, and she was waiting for whatever reason, and I feel like maybe it was for closure, but her husband, he advised her not to see him because they did not get a divorce. And she was mad, and she was relieved, though, that they finally solved the murder and gave their daughter justice. So, yeah, I don't even know how to really conclude this because it's such an awful story. I'm not laughing because, it's just an awful story. Like, how can you do that to a little girl? I don't know. How could you do that to anybody? But a little girl selling Girl Scout cookies, doing something so innocent that children normally done, and this was the result of that. I mean, how horrible of a human could you be? So I am glad, and you know what they say about people that do stuff to children in prison, and I feel like he would deserve it. So 2 beautiful young women, 1 child, 1 woman, 2 lives stolen for no reason. 2 families' lives that had changed forever. And the heart of Nashville during the winter of 1975, the city lost its sense of joy that it felt at one time. Like the sense of security and letting your children be children and playing out in a neighborhood was completely gone. So the Girl Scouts' promise of joy and happiness in a college freshman who was just beginning their life, the whole sense of the innocence was gone, and Nashville felt it. So Marcia Trimble was only 9 years old, just trying to do what Girl Scouts do best, selling cookies with a beautiful, bright smile, selling cookies to her neighbor, and Sarah Perez, a 19-year-old, was just trying to fill her ambitions with kindness and studying at Vanderbilt to fulfill her dreams of helping people in need. Both taken by the same disgusting person, Jerome Bartlett. So as we look back, we can remember Marcia and Sarah not for how they died, but how they lived in their short lives that they had with a light, joy, and innocence. And we can remember the resilience of these families who had to carry this heartbreak for decades without answers. I'm so glad that they got justice and answers of how this happened and that this person is getting a payback for what they did. So as we remember these 2 beautiful lives, let's take a moment and think of the families who carried this heartbreak for decades with courage and dignity. May their stories help us and remind us to protect what is most vulnerable and fight for the truth and never stop seeking justice no matter how long it takes. So yeah, I don't really know how to end this. It's so sad. Oh my gosh. So thanks for joining me today on Tangled in Tennessee. I am your host, Vanessa Mcgee, and as always, stay safe, stay curious, stay kind, and thank you for getting tangled in Tennessee with me today. Brush some tangles out of your hair, girl. Bye, y'all. So I just wanted to give a little update. Marcia's mother, Virginia, did write a book and help assist in writing other books. One is called A Season of Darkness. It began with the brutal murder of pure innocence. You can find it on Amazon. She also was honored by one of the Tennessee governors a few years back for sharing her story and trying to help prevent children having this occur to them again. So, yeah, it's such a sad case. But I just want to let y'all know you can find the book on Amazon.